Hey, everybody, welcome back to another wonderful episode of Profiting with Nonprofits, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes and into the world of all things nonprofit, sitting down with marketers, financial advisors, grant writers, web designers, anybody that has anything to do with the nonprofit space and has their talents. We sit down to talk to them, get their take on things, and understand better how to leverage that in the nonprofit world to obviously profit with your nonprofit. Today's episode, I'm sitting down with a really cool guy who I actually met in real life. I know it's crazy. People don't meet people in real life. They usually just meet them on the internet. But I met this fellow last week at a networking event. His name is Danny Diamond, a wonderful Canadian fellow who also happens to be a fantastic strategic advisor and deals a lot in the nonprofit space. Danny is a wealth of knowledge, and we've been talking back and forth about several different things. And Danny's actually going to be coming on board with us here at GiveSuite to do a couple things. So speaking of which, this podcast is proudly sponsored by GiveSuite. GiveSuite is limitless software for limitless leaders, an all-in-one fundraising platform that gives you everything you need from start to finish, soup to nuts, to be able to get your nonprofit where it needs to be to enable yourself to grow and scale. At $297 per organization, we're the best SaaS deal on the planet. And if you're looking to learn more about GiveSuite, you can sign up today for a strategy call with myself to learn more about how GiveSuite might be ideal for your organization. And if it's not, we'll send you somewhere else. But don't listen to me. No one cares about me at this point. Let's sit down and dive into the show. Danny, welcome aboard. What's going on, man?
Yeah, I appreciate it, John. Happy to be here, and it was nice to meet you in person too. So let's get down to it. How can we do
So,
this?
so what's your deal?
So I spend a lot of time helping kind of a couple of groups of people really grow and thrive. One is private business, and these are private businesses. These are businesses that have had some success in the market that are really looking to create some impact, and that's a really interesting part of it. And what's probably more interesting to you today and to your listeners is thinking about how we help charities and not-for-profit organizations. And when we think about impact, and I think that's something that really resonates with me and may resonate with other people here as well. There's more to it than just dollars and cents. We want to do good in this place. We want to impact people. We want to really help and leave legacy. And when we think a little bit about that, we think about charities and not-for-profits. I think that there's this maybe myth out there that charities and not-for-profit organizations are run by volunteers and are not professional and just kind of get by. And I think it's a real shame. So I think there's a lot of room to help, and maybe we'll explore some of that today.
So my question, you said it's right on right on the nose there. Like, how come this myth came to be? Like that, people, I always say this to people, like, or everyone, you have to run your organization like a business, and if you run it like a passion project, then you're doomed to fail. And I've seen this with several people that I've worked with over the years. So how did that whole myth come to be? It's like you're allowed to make money, like you're allowed to make money. You're not, just because you're a non-for-profit. It's just a tax status. It's not like you're not allowed to take a salary. So
Yeah.
where does that come from?
Yeah. And maybe it's right in the name. And I think you hit it when you kicked off. Not for profit, people feel, I think, sometimes that not for profit means we better not make any money. And as you say, the idea of earning profit, it's really about charitable status. And of course, there are rules. And depending on sort of your jurisdiction where you operate, you're clearly allowed to earn a profit. And the name sort of belies that, which is sort of strange. But, I think that part of it comes from the fact that the people that are involved in these types of organizations tend to be volunteers. They tend to have their sort of real business, their full-time job, the thing that takes up most of their time. And on the side, on the edge, they're trying to do some good in the world. And so they spend some time, doing what they're doing on the charity side, but it doesn't seem to get quite as much attention, doesn't get quite as much focus, and certainly doesn't get as much professionalism. And of course, there are outliers, but I think, when you think about the middle market charity, the sort of everyday charity that you think of, whether it be, your synagogue or your church or whatever it may be, they tend to sort of have a function, a social project, a social function, social impact. But when it comes to the financial operation, wow, we fall down quite a bit.
But that's part of what I was saying before. Is it like, you run it like a business. every business is really a social enterprise. Every business is really about community building. Every company, their whole part of the marketing that goes into running a company is social enterprise, is community building, community growth, because community growth drives sales. So why not have that same mentality as a nonprofit? You're the same thing, just a different variable in what you label it.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, but I don't think everyone does agree. I think that whenever you're running any kind of an organization, and clearly a charitable one, I think it's really important to think about, how to professionalize, how to run it like a business, how to earn profit. And once you earn profit, we could talk about this, once you earn profit, you can think about what do you do with that profit? And that's to say, one of the most important things about running a business or running a charity, and to me, they're the same thing, so I'll stop delineating between them, is that you have to have some financial literacy around this. You have to understand your numbers. How much are you going to take in? How much can you afford to put out into your programs? Those things have to line up. You got to be smart about that, and really driving that financial literacy to understand, just at a very simple level, like I say, what are your inflows and outflows? How do you manage your programs? And what's the thinking behind that? I think the reason, or probably the most important reason that that's important, is so you don't run out of money.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask you next is, a hot issue right now going on in America is everyone's losing their crap over, the pause and all the federal funding and grants. And I've seen several organizations say we're shutting down and we're doing this and this is evil and blah blah blah. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you should have planned better. Don't rely on, the federal grant and the government is just like a big giant donor. And any minute though, this guy could like cut you off, and then what are you going to do? And so how do you, as a financial strategist and an advisor, what's your take on this? Because I'm sure you got lots to say.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of reminds me of what happened in a lot of places, and it certainly happened in Canada. This idea of sustainability. So as we roll the clock back, it's now, late 2019, early 2020, and COVID is starting to hit. And the government in Canada rolled out quite a few programs as far as, trying to keep, different companies and different institutions afloat. They were sort of printing money for you. And if you were a charity, you were taking this money in and you were, happy. And as you say, it was almost like, a big donor just shows up on your doorstep one day unsolicited and says, "Hey, I'd like to write you a check." And so what a lot of people did, and what a lot of organizations did, is they took that money and they went out and they spent it. And what I think would have been maybe a little bit better is to just think about, how do you marry, today's impact versus tomorrow's impact, and how do you think about sustainability? How do you think about your organization being around for a long time? And it's obviously a great thing to go and create impact and do good things today, but if you can't keep doing them tomorrow, it's really quite a shame. So, when I work with charities, when I work with these folks, I think it's really about thinking about your money in buckets. You've sort of got your bucket
Mhm.
for today and you've got your bucket for tomorrow. And of course, it gets a little bit more involved than that. But at a very simple level, it's about having money for tomorrow.
No, for sure. And part of what I actually was in the process of writing an article I'm going to publish on LinkedIn all about this, is that I've said this before. I advised several companies years ago about some similar, like if you put all your eggs in one basket, then something's going to happen and then you're going to be screwed. But if you actually focus on cultivating your existing donors and cultivating your existing community and building that strategy around monthly giving so that you have a base of cash flow going for you, then you're not going to be so far up the creek. And from what I'm seeing online, it seems like a lot of these organizations totally forgot about their existing people, or they created programming that was so out there that didn't connect with their people. So therefore, to ask them for money didn't make any sense because these people that they're trying to appeal to don't have any money and they're just relying on federal funding. And now you're just like, well, wait a minute, what do we do? But like if you have that strategy of like in also like in term like building that recurring revenue strategy, that recurring giving strategy, then you're probably sitting there like that, kind of laughing about it, like, yeah, whatever, like, okay, so we lost a chunk of that, but we still got this. And I think it also plays true to like the leadership and understanding with the financial literacy too, is that if you understand where your organization's at, based breaking down the numbers, you can easily pivot to figure out how you can fill that gap. But if you're just running everything without knowing what's going on, when you get smacked in the face, you kind of have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, and I think a little bit about this, so many parts. Let's talk nuts and bolts here. So, a couple of things to think about when you're cultivating donors, and obviously donor revenue is going to be a huge part of really any charitable, purpose and mission. Um, I think there's a lot of excitement. What's new and shiny? Let's move on to the next donor. Let's try to recruit someone new. And the relationships that have gotten you the donors that you have today, I think are not to be taken for granted, are really to be cultivated. And you do that in a few ways. I mean, you do that with you do that at a personal level with your relationships. You treat people properly. That's what brought them in the door. And I think what keeps them in the door, though, is really doing a great job of explaining to them how they've created impact. So that's, reporting back. And when we think about reporting, I think people get a little anxious or maybe even a little nauseous. It doesn't have to be snazzy. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be, your check last week or last month enabled us to reach, 5 new people in our program. Thanks to you, we've, sent lunch out to 10 kids at school or whatever your mission is. And I think, being able to sort of return the favor, these people that are coming and writing checks and want to support you and support your work, want to see the impact. And I think where
Right.
we fall down sometimes is really not doing that, is being very gracious and thankful for the gift that comes in, and sort of forgetting that really donors want to see that. And of course there's so many benefits in doing that. It strengthens a relationship, it re-engages donors, and it could even help elevate their gift to either another gift or something on a legacy basis, which is a totally different ballgame when you think about smaller gifts or larger gifts that you can manage. And that's all kind of one thought. And the second thought I have here is, we think about practical, how do you deal with short run versus long run gifting and planning.
Hmm.
I think it's really smart just to think about, you have a magic number almost. You can say, look, for every gift that comes in, I'm going to spend 50%, or I'm going to spend 70%. The idea behind that is less important about the percentages that we're talking about. More important to say, in every dollar that comes in, I'm going to retain something. And that retention is for something. It's for
Hmm.
tomorrow, it's for administration, it's for some special program, it's for something beyond today's immediate impact. And I think what's important there is, A, to be really clear about what are your goals and managing that in a responsible way. And B, being really clear when you're speaking to your donors, this is not a secret. This isn't that we're mismanaging your money. This is about you understanding as a donor that you're dealing with an organization that's really professional. We're here for the long run. We're not going to run out of money before we go and fulfill our mission. We want you, along for the ride.
And that makes a lot of sense. And that's part of what I do on the marketing end, is keep that conversation alive and showcase that through email marketing and through storytelling. Because and I always say this, is that if you keep up the conversation and you keep showing them what you're doing with their money and showcasing and going through all the different things, when it comes time to that big campaign, you're going to see significant amounts of increase in giving versus not dealing with it at all, because people want to know what's going on with their money. And if you're transparent with them, then it makes it all better.
And I love the idea of storytelling. I think that's what makes the world go round. And, it engages people and gets people excited. And people get bored and sort of fall off the wagon when you start telling them about numbers or telling them about,
Yeah, because nobody
key
cares.
performance indicators. They just want to know, just tell me a story. And I think, what's powerful about what you bring to the table at GiveSuite, I think, is, the ability to be able to use your tools and use your software to produce data that then we can use. And this is maybe the thing that we can do the best, is to use that data to tell a story. And that
Yeah.
story is the story of your organization, your charity, its impact, its origins, and its future, and how we're going to take over the world and how we're going to do good.
Yeah, 100%. Because when it comes to when data is the key to to dealing with marketing, especially communication, because you can see what people are engaging with, what people are reacting to, and how you can tweak the message that's going to have a higher impact. And if you just go in there blindly, then you're just wasting your time and you're wasting your money. But if you look at the numbers and you see, like, my one of my favorite examples is this campaign we did for an organization we worked with. It was called Meet the Heroes, and we replicated that out to several of our clients because my logic was every organization from the janitor to the CEO has a reason why they're working for this organization. And so we sat down, interviewed all these volunteers that were part of the organization, got their stories because everyone's got a different answer. No two answers are the same. We turned that into an email sequence and we turned that into social media content. And guess what happened? They were seeing above average open rates, about 50% open rates, 45% click rates, and seeing an average donation, average about 2 to 3 donations per email that went out that were averaging about $150 a piece. And out of those three, about one and a half turned into recurrings. So we were like, okay, this makes sense. This message make people, this is what people want to see because this is where the money's coming. And then they started doing a little bit less frequent communications. This was going out like every week. And they saw their numbers drop a little bit. And it was stuff that wasn't, it was like newslettery stuff. And it wasn't as engaging. And they saw the numbers drop. But the point being was that when you have something that when you see the numbers and you see what people are doing, how they're reacting, you create more you replicate that and you scale it, you produce it, and you scale it, and then you continue to see the results. And that's the whole key to nonprofit marketing, and is having that story, but compiling the data to be able to give you the means to tell the story.
Yeah, and I think the marketing story is going to drive hopefully some great results and some great financial results. And there's another example where you tell a story, and this time you're telling your story inside your organization, and this is to your board and to your stakeholders. And maybe if you're sort of in your infancy and you don't have a full-fledged board yet, it's about you and your founder, you and your co-founders thinking about what's working, what's not
Right.
working. And the money just numbers don't lie. So
Yeah.
getting a little bit of clarity around your numbers, not only does it help the outside world in telling them a story, but it helps you first. And I think it's really, really important to get some clarity around that. And often what I see sort of as I go through the world is people are really, really good. They're really smart. They create these organizations. They've got a great purpose and a great mission. They're just so afraid of money, so afraid to talk about it, to analyze it, to think about it. And this is just, it's not rocket science. The proof that it's not rocket science is that I'm here talking about it. And, I'm a pretty simple guy. I speak English, I speak simply. And I think, there's magic in looking at numbers and being able to tell a very straightforward, simple story to people to make them understand what's happening.
100%, 100%. And if you're clear with people and you give them you straight to the point, and you give them what they want, then they're going to see tremendous success. So I guess before we wrap this up, Danny, what's one thing you would advise somebody who's looking to get to start a nonprofit, or is, let's say, 1 or 2 years into a nonprofit, into running their nonprofit, and they're looking to grow? What piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think, anytime you're going to go and launch an organization of any kind, I think it's really important to slow down. And we're going to strike a balance between, slowing down and being sort of inhibited and not moving at all. We don't need to tick every single box, but you got to make sure that you're ticking some really core boxes. What does your institution, what does your organization do? What does it want to do? Who's going to be involved? What's your plan? What kind of systems do you need to use? What kind of software is important? Who's your advisor? What are the things you don't know? Who's going to support you, not just financially, but when you think about operationally? It could be a financial coach, it could be a technical person who's going to help with fundraising, whatever that may be. And you think a little bit about assembling the A team, people that are willing to volunteer their time, people that are willing to give you a bit of a deal, people that are willing to sell you their service, their products to really help you grow. And once you sort of slow down enough to assemble that A team, go forward and conquer the world. And I think, that's what it really is. So what I think I see the most is people move a little too quick. They launch a little bit too quickly. They don't have quite what they need. They don't have the team they quite need, and they have some success, but maybe not as much as they could have had anyway. So, I think that's a great idea, and obviously it's something I love to do, and happy to spend some time talking to anybody who's interested.
Well, there you go. Well, Danny, thanks so much for joining us today on the show. It was really nice talking to you and sitting down having this conversation with you. I know we've had several over the past couple days, but it's really nice to hear it from your mouth and get it from your brain. If anybody's looking to learn more about Danny, I'm going to post his information in the show notes. Danny's also going to be coming on board with us here at GiveSuite to do financial literacy as part of getting on board with our system. So you understand your data, so you better understand how to market yourself to be able to better understand how to grow and scale your organization. So I'm going to post all Danny's information in the show notes. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast and all major podcasting platforms. Check us out on our YouTube channel, Nonprofit Academy. And if you're looking to learn more about GiveSuite, I'll drop that link there too. Book a strategy call with me today. And until next time, I'll catch you guys on the next upload.